Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to the lineup. Today is March the 9th, 2016, 2023. I'm Barry Stagner, and as I kind of teased you a little bit last week, I get people all the time asking me, when are we going to see Louie? When are we going to see Louie? I like to call him the most famous dog in the world because he is literally known around the world. Last year in Dallas in September, people were asking about Louie, saying how much they loved Louie. I was in Seattle in November. Same thing. We love Louie. Louie's beautiful. In the Philippines, people say hi to Louie. So I thought I'd give you a glimpse of this big boy because he's growing. And people at church were saying, hey, we want to have a look at him. So let me see if I can get him up here in my lap again. Here, bub. Come here. Come here. Come here. Here. Come here. Oh, my goodness. He's not as easy to pick up as he was when some of you who've been with us for a while saw him at 4.5 pounds. But we're not sure. He hasn't been weighed in a while, but we're not sure exactly what he weighs. But he's over 60 pounds and headed for 70 or 80. And as you can see, he's still as sweet as can be. And he's got these just beautiful blue-green eyes. And hi, Bob. Yeah. And so I thought I'd let you have a peek at him and this big, huge guy. And actually, he's going to go into a boarding and training season here for a while. And so we're excited about that for him. He's still a pup. He'll be a year this month on the 27th. But thought I'd let you have a look at the big boy. And this is Louie. So that's our monthly update. So you can get a look at how big this guy is. And he's a long way from his initial 4.5 pound weight. For those of you, as I said, who have seen him, you got to go now, bub. I can't hold you anymore. Here we go. Attaboy. So he's a lot of fun, and we sure enjoy having him. So anyway, that's the Louie update. And I wanted to do one more thing before we jump into our stories. And our stories are a little bit abbreviated today because I wanted to take some time to talk to you about something that was birthed out of our youth ministry at the church. Our youth pastor, just thinking about the months of the year and how we date them by number. Obviously, March, the third month of the year. This is 3, and then we've got 16 coming up. And about 2 years ago, our youth ministry started this push called Mission 316, 316 Mission. And they posed it that way because there's actually a church called Mission 316. We didn't want any of that to be confused. But for that, along those lines, you'll see this logo, and that's the ministry of the church. And we've tried to make it nondescript. There's nothing about our church. We're not here to promote our church or anything else. We're here to promote Jesus. And what that whole day is about and what 316 Mission is about is sharing John 3:16. You can do it verbally. You can share your testimony. A lot of people have done that and what John 3:16 meant to them and how their lives were transformed. But also those of you who have social media platforms, and I assume most of you do, be it Instagram or Facebook, we have some, and I'll give you the website here in a moment where you can go, but we have some downloadable graphics that simply have John 3:16 on it. Now, we stayed with the black and white color theme. You can design it. You can do whatever you want because, again, this isn't about any church. This is about Jesus. And, with the internet being used for so many things that are against God, we thought, hey, let's just take back a day. And what an appropriate day. John 3:16 on 3:16 spread around the world by Christians. So you can do a multitude of things. As I said, you can just quote the verse. You can read it online and on your Facebook Live or on YouTube or whatever, Rumble or wherever else you can broadcast. You can just share your story online, or you can just post it online. And I want to encourage you to do so. And if you want to have a graphic and not go through the struggles of making one, you can look for this information at 316mission.info and at 316 Mission on Instagram. And what you'll find at 316 Mission Info is all of the graphics. There's a section that says tools. And when you click on that, it'll pop up downloadable graphics, and you can just download. I think there's 6 or 7 different graphics to where you can just share John 3:16. So on that day, and then on top of that, at 3:16 p.m., wherever you are in the world, we're asking everybody to pause and pray during that time. So, with all the time zones around the world, that means that the world is going to be prayed for round the clock on March 16th, 2023. So, again, mark your calendars, 3:16. Share John 3:16 in whatever way you want to do it. And my hope is, and as we first talked about this at the church, and was just simply one, we don't want this to be a promotion for our church or any church for that matter. And we want people to be able to take it as their own and design it and do whatever they want, promote it however they want, and just have the day be about Jesus. Let's take social media back from all the garbage that's out there and share something positive. So again, you can go to that 316 address, and I'll put it up there again so you can have a look at it. 316mission.info is the website, and it will lead you to all the tools that you can use there. There's actually also a video that you can download if there's any pastors out there watching or church leaders. You can show it at your church. And it's about a 2-minute video, and it's first class. And it just really kind of gives the story of what the gospel is all about and its impact around the world. And it's just a real brief little clip, but done by a professional editor and videographer who actually does a lot of stuff for television. So I think you'd be blessed by that. So just different ways to understand it. Also, there's information about the belief system that we have, what it is we believe. But really, the important thing is just share John 3:16 on 3:16. And let's take back this these social media platforms, and use them for God's glory for that day. I know many of you post different scriptures all the time, and we certainly do that on our platforms as well. But I think it'd be great, and my hope is, and my prayer is, that some media outlet would catch wind of this, and just do a story on it, or maybe even a news story on Fox News or something, and just that Christians around the world were sharing John 3:16 on 3:16. So let's get the word out, see Christ glorified. And you just never know. That message of hope has transformed lives. And, that's what the Bible tells us, that when we receive the implanted word, it's able to save our souls. And Jesus is the word. So, again, 3:16 on 3:16. Let's all get on board. And as you go to that address, you can find some downloadable graphics. Now, let's move on with our stories today. And this is kind of an unusual story to start with. But it does kind of remind us that we're in the midst of a progression, a birth bang like progression that the Bible has talked about, and everything is moving forward. Everything is moving toward the Great Tribulation. And, one of the things I think we need to remember, because a lot of times I think we look at kind of what I call the preamble to the Olivet Discourse in Matthew 24:3-8, where Jesus said, when asked by Peter, Andrew, James, and John, what are the signs of his coming and the end of the age? He said, there's going to be false Christ. And he said there's going to be wars and rumors of wars. There's going to be national tensions, ethnic tensions, famines, pestilences, and seismoth, earthquakes, and atmospheric events. And by the way, California is headed for, we've had a bit of a switch here in the weather, the atmospheric rivers that we've all been hearing about. They've been dropping down from Alaska, very cold, low snow levels down to like even 1,500 feet in some areas. And now we've got what we here in California call the Pineapple Express. And now there's an atmospheric river moving up from the south. And these are usually heavy moisture storms that come up from the Southern Pacific. And they usually, again, bring a lot of rain, but they bring a lot of warm rain. And so there's already talk about concerns about flooding. It's supposed to hit tomorrow, at least here in Southern California, but also in Northern California, where the snow is just at incredible levels. And here, even in the local San Bernardino Mountains, people are still digging out. 12 people have died here in Southern California by being locked in their homes because nobody could get to them because the snow was so heavy. And now we've got warm weather storms coming in via the Pineapple Express, a jet stream that comes up from the south, and opposed to that which came before, which was all these atmospheric rivers. I think there's been 8 or 10 of them throughout the winter months already, coming down from Alaska, bringing that cold air and thus a lot of snow. So when you've got near record snowfalls in the mountains, and then you top that off with a warm weather storm that instantly melts that snow within a day or much of it, there's still going to be snow above the 6,000 foot level, 4 to 5 feet in the Sierras, they say. But again, God told us these things are going to be happening in a birth pang like fashion in the last days, and it includes weather anomalies. But one of the things I think that's important for us to remember about this is, when Jesus is talking about the normal recurring events of life happening throughout the course of history, he's just talking about what always is. There's always going to be false Christ. There's always going to be people claiming an anointing from the Lord. There's always going to be national strife. There's always going to be ethnic tensions. There's always going to be these types of things. But then he said, these are the beginning of sorrows. And that phrase can be translated as the commencement of birth pangs. And it's actually translated as birth pangs in Paul's letter to the Thessalonians. But here's the thing. What we have to remember is, he's not talking about just the pregnancy period. He's talking about the labor period. All of a sudden, things are going to change. And I believe that process has begun. I think we started a march toward it when Israel was born as a nation on May 14th, 1948. But now, all of a sudden, things just radically changed, including, the earthquakes that are happening around the world, the weather anomalies that are happening around the world. Here we've got people dressed like it's late spring in places where there's usually snow on the ground. And now here you've got sunny Southern California. There's even a song, "It Never Rains in Southern California." And, our average rainfall is just been bypassed long time ago. I think within the first 2 or 3 storms that we had this year, our annual rainfall was exceeded, and now it just keeps getting beyond, further and further beyond that mark. So we're seeing all these things, but what Jesus was saying when he made that commencement of birth pang statements or beginning of sorrows is that just all of a sudden, labor hits without announcement. When a pregnant woman is moving toward that final stage of her pregnancy, and which includes labor. And it's not the whole pregnancy isn't labor. So we would expect that all of a sudden these things that have always been present are going to get far worse. And, interesting that he begins with false Christ. And that's exactly what we have going on today. And we have to remember that the word Christ means anointed or anointing. And the truth is, we have a lot of people today who are claiming an anointing from Christ. And yet Jesus said at the end of the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 7:21 and 22, that many, and that word means the major portion, he's talking about false teachers, the major portion who say, "Lord, Lord, did we not do all of these sensational things?" And it's interesting that when Jesus talks about that in Matthew chapter 7, he's not talking about their teaching. He's not talking about their doctrine, or they're not talking about it, I should say. But they're saying, didn't we do a lot of miracles? Didn't we cast out demons? Didn't we do all these things that people are fascinated with today? And Jesus will say to them, "Depart from me, I never knew you." And then he'll give the identifier as to why he never knew them, because they practice lawlessness. And this is a lot of what we have going on today, and it's increased exponentially. And actually, this portion of the church, this movement in the church that's relatively new, that just happened on the scene like a birth pang, is the fastest growing portion of the church today. Now, the church, I saw a little clip this morning from a guy who was talking about reading multiple articles about the fact that the church in America is in decline. But he was reminding the viewer that the church around the world is growing by leaps and bounds. It's just going in the other direction here in America. People aren't attending church anymore like they used to, staying home after the pandemic, watching online, those kind of things. And but he was talking about places where the gospel is making progress, places like Iran, where the church is growing faster there than anywhere else in the world. The church is growing by leaps and bounds in Egypt. And we've got a family member that goes to Egypt regularly, and just comes back and talks about how insane the church is, quickly the church is growing and what God is doing there. But again, watching these things happen, we have just all of a sudden seen things advance on multiple levels in the regime, or the realm rather, that Jesus talked about in Matthew 24:3-8. So after a very long introduction, let's get into our first story. And this one, really, I wanted to include this and start with this because one thing we know is that there's going to be a power shift that takes place during the tribulation as far as global governance goes. And there's a power shift happening right now. And that's what this article says from the Epic Times. Iranian warships docking in Latin America reflects new axis of power, analysts say. Iran appears to be making good on its claim to put warships in the Panama Canal before the end of 2023, but analysts say that's just the beginning. Last week, Brazil permitted 2 Iranian warships to moor off Rio de Janeiro's famous beaches. The event, and I actually saw some people, and there was a little picture of a couple sitting on the beach, and off in the distance was an Iranian warship visible from the shore. The event occurred between February 26th and March 4th, causing a stir among democratic nations throughout the region. Political and security insiders say the arrival of the warships is a consequence of a new wave of leftist leaders who've swept across Latin America in recent years, including Brazil's new president. And Iran is capitalizing on its strong ties to socialist regimes in the region. And the big picture here doesn't look good. Brazil's former Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ernesto Araújo, told the Epic Times, and Araújo said it was alarming to see his native country roll out the red carpet for Iranian warships. I'm very concerned as a Brazilian and as someone who has an idea of what Iran is up to in the world. Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, commonly known as Lula, embraced the arrival of the vessels Iris Macron and Iris Dina on February 26th after more than a month's delay. The reason for the delay was no coincidence, but rather a strategic hold due to Lula's plan to visit President Joe Biden on January 13th. And documentation from the Ministry of Defense in Brazil shows the warships were originally authorized to enter the port of Rio de Janeiro on the same day as Lula's Biden visit. So again, talking about a shift in power, but think about what's going on. Here you've got these countries in South America, and more of these countries are finding themselves with socialist Marxist leaders. And what is basically frighteningly popular among young people in the United States today? Socialism and Marxism. And we've even had those very publicly state that is their goal for this country that are in places of office, high office, here in the United States of America. So there's a shift in the thinking, and now we're seeing that has made it all the way up to those in places of power in the highest seat of government in their own countries in South America. And now they're befriending the world's most significant sponsor of terrorism, Iran, and they, kind of have that same mentality of just tyranny and control of the people as the socialists do. But there is a shift of power that is taking place. And, I was curious as to how far the Rio de Janeiro, the port, is from the United States, because there was concerns about Soviet aircraft being in Venezuela over the past few years, and nuclear capable aircraft being harbored in Venezuela at the airports there. And that's just an hour away from San Diego, California for a missile flight. And however, Rio's port, some 6,600 miles. So it doesn't really put them in a position to strike us, but it does tell us that the world is changing. And there is a new axis of power. And that's why we hear so much talk about that in the United States. And again, all of this is in preparation for the man of sin, the lawless one, who is going to be revealed after the removal of the church. And he is going to take global power. And, to have a centralized system of governance has to be on people's minds. And this is what we're moving toward with groups like the World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab and Bill Gates and George Soros and all of them just talking about, the need for population control and, reducing our carbon footprint and all these things and getting the whole world behind this. And, Joe Biden keeps trying to turn over pandemic response authority to the World Health Organization. And thankfully, we've got some Congress people who are fighting against that and some senators too. But again, just the world is moving toward this type of thinking, this socialist type of thinking that everybody has to have the same thing. No one can have any more than anybody else. It doesn't matter what you do, how hard you work, how educated you are. Everybody has to be under the same umbrella. and under control of a very small handful of people. And that handful is going to turn into one hand during the tribulation. Even though he's going to have 10 associates for a while, the Antichrist is going to be the ruler of the world during the tribulation. And again, we're just seeing so many evidences that the world is getting close to that. And again, as I said, I personally believe with the sudden advance, think about how much things have changed um, in concert with the pandemic. Government control, locking people down, telling who could be open and who couldn't, who could go out to eat and who could work and who couldn't, what companies could be open and who couldn't. All of that paired with all the other things going on in the world. And now here in this same time frame, you've got people who don't know what a woman is anymore. You've got people, as we'll talk about here in a few moments, who are being harassed and arrested for not playing the game, the pronoun game, and all these other things happening. And they just happen like that. And I think that these are labor pains. I think we are moving toward the tribulation. And, I don't think we need to shy away from saying, people get ready. Jesus is coming. He told us, and that's one of the interesting things I've always found about the Olivet Discourse. Jesus is the one who said, no man knows the day or the hour. And he didn't say no man knows anything. He said no man knows the day or the hour. In other words, the moment of the catching away of the church and our gathering together to him, as Paul said in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, is unknown. Nobody knows when it is. But after he made that statement, he went on to give very specific details about what the world is going to be like. It's going to be indifferent to the impending signs of judgment. He said it would be as it was in the days of Noah. In other words, before the rapture, it will be like before the flood. And people just won't care, even though there's clear signs that judgment is coming. And people will be buying and selling, marrying and giving in marriage, acting like nothing is coming until the day Noah entered the ark, is what the statement is. So again, here we are, rapid change, just like all of a sudden labor hits and things are happening. It's just amazing to be living at a time such as this. The Jewish News Syndicate reports that Iran was behind last month's cyber attack on Technion. And Iran was behind a cyber attack on a major research university in Israel last month. The Israel National Cyber Directorate announced on Tuesday. An investigation of the hacking attack on the Technion Israel Institute of Technology in Haifa revealed that a group known as Muddy Water was responsible. The group is affiliated with Iran's Ministry of Intelligence and Security. And during the attack on February 11th, the hackers used malware designed to encrypt operating systems. In response, the Technion unplugged the computer system and asked that students log off and limit their email usage. Some scheduled exams were postponed until the start of the spring semester, and a group calling itself DarkBit sent an email to the Technion during the attack demanding 80 bitcoins in ransom for the information that it claimed to have obtained. This is an amount in digital currency worth about 1.79 million. And the Technion was hacked. The hackers punished us for the apartheid regime. All systems are not accessible and we've lost our data. Therefore, we have to temporarily stop our human resources procedures. Our most sincere apologies to all colleagues, partners, and those who trust us. The Technion posted to its LinkedIn account. And again, this covers a series of topics. One, warfare is changing. And as we all rely more and more on computer technology and, this hacking game and this ransomware, what that actually happened to us as a church. We had somebody shut down our Instagram page, or they hijacked our Instagram page and locked us out, and the thousands of people who followed the church Instagram page. And they basically said, they didn't basically say, they said, if you want to get your page back, click here. And that's where you find out how much you got to pay to get it back. And we just started over. We're not giving the Devil's team any money. So, again, it was kind of a bummer, and still is, just watching your Instagram page slowly grow. But the Calvary Chapel Tustin Instagram page was hacked and shut down and taken control over by the same type of thing. So warfare has changed. But it's interesting also that what this group demanded was bitcoins, 80 bitcoins, $1.79 million worth of bitcoins. And that reminds us that there is going to be simply digital money in the future during the tribulation period. And we've talked plenty about that the U.S. is moving toward that. Other countries are moving toward it. Some are even, Sweden is already basically, or Switzerland rather, is already moving toward that specifically, and no cash. And it's interesting because we are seeing, like, think about flying on an airplane. There's no cash, credit card only. If you want to buy a drink or sandwich or something. And the same thing is happening at different places. I've stumbled on to multiple places that they don't take cash. It's just too risky. Too many people today are stealing from the till and those kind of things. And so they only take credit cards. So again, this type of technology is now available and in place. And the truth is, we're not waiting for technology to develop to where the Antichrist can have a system where he monitors global buying and selling. And if you don't have the mark, you can't purchase. I mean, the technology is already in place. We're not waiting for that to happen. It's already there. So again, these things, I think, just point us to the lateness of the hour, reminding us that, the fig tree has blossomed once again in Israel, is budding and putting forth leaves. And the Jews are back in the promised land that God gave them, just like he said he would do in the last days. And so we're moving closer and closer and closer, and things are just rapidly changing. Now, here's another story that we talked about this a few weeks ago about the permafrost and these zombie viruses. And now this story kind of puts another chilling spin on it. Sorry for the pun there. AccuWeather reports that scientists have revived a zombie virus that's been 48,500 years frozen in permafrost. Now, warmer temperatures in the Arctic are thawing the region's permafrost, a frozen layer of soil beneath the ground, and potentially stirring viruses that, after lying dormant for tens of thousands of years, could endanger animal and human health. While a pandemic unleashed by a disease from the distant past sounds like a plot of a sci-fi movie, scientists warn that the risks, though low, are underappreciated. Chemical and radioactive waste that dates back to the Cold War, which has potential to harm wildlife and disrupt ecosystems, may also be released during the thaw. There's a lot going on with the permafrost that is of concern, and it really shows why it's super important that we keep as much of the permafrost frozen as possible, said Kimberly Miner, a climate scientist at the NASA JPL laboratory at the California Institute of Technology in Pasadena, California. Permafrost covers a fifth of the northern hemisphere, having underpinned the Arctic tundra and boreal forest of Alaska, Canada, and Russia for 1,000 years. It serves as kind of a time capsule, preserving, in addition to ancient viruses, the mummified remains of a number of extinct animals that scientists have been able to unearth and study in recent years, including 2 cave lion cubs and a woolly rhino. The reason permafrost is a good storage medium isn't just because it's cold, it's oxygen free and light doesn't penetrate. But the current day Arctic temperatures are warming up to 4 times faster than the rest of the planet, weakening the top layer of permafrost in the region. Now, we've been talking of late about the fact that many scientists say that the Earth's core stopped rotating and back in 2009, or at least slowed significantly. And now many say it's reversed directions. And, some say, well, it won't really have any effect. But there's been a lot of talk about a polar magnetic shift over the years. Some say it takes thousands of years to happen. Others say it happens not quite that slow, but slowly and gradually over time. And there are some who say that it's instantaneous and catastrophic to events on the Earth. And, there's a lot of studies, and I kind of follow this stuff, as most of you know. And, there's a gentleman, I've mentioned his name before. He's now hopefully with the Lord, Dr. Ivan Browning, who basically predicted the New Madrid quake in the middle of the United States, and the fault there would become active and all these things. And he was saying that it's because of a change in the magnetic field of the Earth. And one of the things that he said, and I happened to be seated next to him at an event that I was at, and he was mentioning the fact that this is going to have major weather implications, and that the climate from one area will then become the climate of another area. And here we've got now the permafrost that's in Siberia and elsewhere, that the top layer is now thawing and potentially releasing all of these things. But here's why I thought we needed to bring this up again today. Now, they're talking about the warming temperatures. It's warming faster than the other parts of the earth. Other parts of the earth happen to be cooling. The average temperature of the earth, it's never going to change enough to end the ability to sustain life or any of those things. The Lord promised in Genesis 8:22, he's in control of that, and he'll make sure the seasons function as they should. But there's coming a time where things are going to change. And in Revelation chapter 11, verse 6, we have record of the two witnesses. And they have Old Testament prophet type powers, including Revelation 11:6 says they have the power to shut heaven so that no rain falls in the days of their prophecy, which, by the way, they prophesy for the first portion of the tribulation period. And they have power over waters to turn them to blood and to strike the earth with all plagues as often as they desire. Now, the earth dwellers, as they're called in Revelation, are going to hate the two witnesses. And when they are finally, then in the Revelation 11 goes on to say that, if someone wants to kill them, fire comes out of their mouth and devours them. But finally, God allows them to be slain, and they lay dead in the streets of Jerusalem for 3 days, and the world exchanges presents, celebrating the death of the two witnesses. Now, the interesting thing about this happens at the blowing of the seventh trumpet, or in that same time frame of the blowing of the seventh trumpet. And what the seventh trumpet holds are the seven bowls of God's undiluted wrath that are wrath in the form that has never taken place since men were on the face of the earth. That's how they're described. And, again, the seven seals, the seventh of the seven seals contains the seven trumpets. The seventh of the seven trumpets contains the bowl judgments, but the bowl judgments, all seven, there's nothing after that. In them, the wrath of God is satisfied. So after the two witnesses are killed, listen to what's going to happen on the surface of the earth. And keep in mind the story we just read about the permafrost releasing viruses and things that were trapped there during the Cold War, radioactive materials and waste and things of that nature. And the U.S. and Russia buried things in the permafrost and at sea during the Cold War. Should they begin to leak, very possible some of the things that happened during the tribulation are going to be caused by that. And, God can warm the earth up, and he can cool it down, and he can melt the permafrost. And as a matter of fact, during the 16th seal, or the Revelation 16, during the bowl judgments, the sun is given the power to scorch men's bodies. But listen to this in Revelation 16, 1 through 5, as the bowl judgments were poured out. John says, "Then I heard a loud voice from the temple saying to the seven angels, 'Go and pour out the bowls of the wrath of God on the earth.' So the first went out and poured out his bowl on the earth, and a foul and loathsome sore came upon the men who had the mark of the beast and those who worshipped his image." Is that something released from the permafrost, the virus? Possibly. Not saying it is, but, you never know what God is going to use. The second angel poured out his bowl on the sea, and it became blood as a dead man, and every living creature in the sea died. Then the third angel poured out his bowl on the rivers and the springs of water, and they became blood. And I heard the angel of the waters saying, "You are righteous, O Lord, the one who is and who was and who is to be, because you have judged these things. For they have shed the blood of the saints and the prophets, and you have given them blood to drink, for it is their just due." The timing of all these things, again, is very interesting in light of the fact that I believe that we are, the world is, I should say, we will not be here for the tribulation. And listen, I hear this all the time, and I saw somebody the other day basically, slinging dirt at people who believe in the pre-tribulation rapture and said, the Bible teaches that, it's before God's wrath. We're not appointed to wrath, and wrath doesn't begin until the second half of the tribulation. I don't agree with that at all, because God's wrath has multiple forms. Remember those who wandered in the desert? They would not, the Lord said, I swore in my wrath, they will not enter my rest. Well, that was God's wrath. And it wasn't cataclysmic like we see during the tribulation. It was consequential wrath. And part of the consequential wrath of God that makes the whole 7 years of the tribulation God's wrath is that the Antichrist is allowed to rise to power, because he who hinders no longer restrains him. rising to power. It's God's wrath that allows the Antichrist of Revelation 6:2 to ride onto the world scene. All 7 years of the tribulation are the wrath of God. Removing the church is an act of God's wrath. Why? Because the church, according to Jesus, is the only salt and light that the world has, the only preserving and purifying influence that the world has. It is only us that are holding back out and out lawlessness and all the things that are going to take place during the tribulation. You got to think about the numberless multitude that are killed by the Antichrist, who the world is in agreement with, that these undesirables have to die during the tribulation period. And, all these things going on in our world today are leading up to that specific point. And we'll talk some more about some of the stories that tell us how corrupt things are getting. But just one little tag about the article we just read is that possible dangers include buried waste from the mining of heavy metals and chemicals such as the pesticide DDT, which was banned in the early 2000s. Radioactive material has also been dumped in the Arctic by Russia and the United States since the advent of nuclear testing in the 1950s. Abrupt thaw rapidly exposes old permafrost horizons, releasing compounds and microorganisms sequestered in deeper layers. Miner, that's one of the researchers, noted in their 2021 paper. In the research paper, Miner labeled a direct infection of humans with ancient pathogens from permafrost as currently improbable. However, she's worried about what she termed Methuselah microorganisms, named after the biblical figure with the longest life. These are organisms that could bring the dynamics of ancient and extinct ecosystems into the present day Arctic with unknown consequences. And the reemergence of ancient microorganisms has the potential to change soil composition, vegetative growth, possibly further accelerating the effects of climate change. Of course, they had to throw that in there. Miner said, we are really unclear as to how these microbes are going to interact with the modern environment, she said. It's really not an experiment that I think any of us want to run. The best course of action, Miner said, is to try and halt the thaw and the wider climate crisis and keep those hazards entombed in the permafrost for good. So again, I don't know if this has anything to do with it, but I think it's very interesting that this kind of language is being used, releasing something onto society. And during the bowl judgments, a loathsome sore coming upon the bodies of men, all those, at least men and women, all those who had taken the mark of the beast. Well, is our world changing? Absolutely. And here's a story that talks about how the church is being impacted. And the Christian Headlines has, I think, our next 3 stories. And a UK pro-life activist, the headline reads, was arrested again for silently praying outside an abortion clinic, not yelling and screaming at women that are going in there, not telling them they're going to burn, but standing there quietly. And I saw some pictures and video of this woman who was standing, leaning up against a wall, just with her head bowed and her eyes closed, and just praying, not praying out loud, just praying. And she was arrested. And according to CBN News, Isabel Von Spruce was arrested again on Monday outside the BPAS Robert Clinic in Kings Norton, Birmingham. She was first arrested there last December for silently praying outside the facility, since it is within a censorship zone or a buffer zone. Christian Headlines previously reported a UK court recently dropped the charges initially laid against Von Spruce for violating a public space protection order which prohibits protesting, namely engaging in any act of approval or disapproval or attempted act of approval or disapproval with respect to issues related to abortion services by any means, including graphic, verbal, or written means, prayer, or counseling outside the abortion clinic. They have a law that you cannot be in a certain distance from an abortion clinic to try and sway a woman from taking the life of her own child. And it's just, again, just so bizarre to see how radically things have changed and how our world has changed and how lawlessness is abounding and how the love of many is growing cold. And up is down, down is up. And Isaiah 5:20 says that good will be called evil and evil will be called good. Now we have to remember that Isaiah talks a lot about the last days too. And if you back up into Isaiah chapter 2, which obviously comes before 3, 4, and 5, we're told that this is regarding when the time when the Lord shakes the earth. That's a reference to the tribulation, a time when he shakes the earth. That's when good is going to be called evil and evil called good, and darkness will trade places with light and things of that nature. So now we've got a woman silently praying, not harassing, not doing anything to bother the people going in, standing there silently praying that somehow divine intervention would happen on behalf of the child and for the sake of the mother as well. And she is arrested again. Christian Headlines also reports here in the United States, Texas Tech suspends basketball coach for quoting Bible verses about masters and servants. Texas Tech's athletic department has suspended head basketball coach Mark Adams after he quoted a Bible verse in an interaction with a player that the school deemed racially insensitive. Adams, who is in his second year with the Red Raiders, had been encouraging the student athlete to be more receptive to coaching and reference Bible verses about workers, teachers, parents, slaves serving their masters, the athletic department said in a statement. Adams immediately addressed this with the team and apologized, the statement said. The statement also noted that athletic director Kirby Huckett addressed the issue with Adams and issued him a written reprimand. And Huckett subsequently made the decision to suspend Adams effective immediately in order to conduct a more thorough inquiry of Adams' interactions with his players and staff, the statement continued. Adams told the stadium website he was referencing Jesus' words. I was quoting scripture, Adams said. He told the stadium. It was a private conversation about coaching and when you have a job and being coachable. I said that in the Bible that Jesus talks about how we all have bosses. We are all servants, Adams added. I was quoting the Bible about that. The school did not say which Bible verses Adams quoted, but in Luke 17, Jesus recounted a story often called the parable of the master and the servant. In 1 Peter 2:18, the Apostle Peter writes, servants, be subject to your masters with all respect, not only to the good and gentle, but also to the unjust. Adam addressed the team about the incident, but did not apologize, he said. One of my coaches said it bothered the player. Adams said, I explained to them I didn't apologize. And the school is also investigating an incident in which Adams allegedly spit on a player, the stadium reported. And he told the website he had a bad cough. He'd gone to the doctor and slobbered on the player during the game. Oh, my goodness. What a mess. A Texas basketball coach suspended for quoting Bible verses that were deemed racially insensitive. Well, there's verses that are also sensitive or insensitive to another group of people who seem to be the power players in our world today, and that's the LGBTQ crowd. And, those in many places are off limits as well. Matter of fact, I've had to sign documents stating that I wouldn't teach on certain subjects, or I was asked to at least. And of course, I haven't signed it. It's funny. I was in another country just north of the United States, and I had some DVDs that I'd taken up there for people to purchase if they so desired, on messages I'd given on different topics. And one of them was on the subject of nature and nurture. And somebody said to me, it kind of shocked me, well, I can't believe you have the guts to bring something like this up here. And it's just the Bible, just teaching the Bible, but it's becoming taboo in more and more places, including our school system, all over the world. Now, the Christian Headlines has another story. This is going up the ladder a little bit, so to speak. A painting of Jesus greeting seamen at the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy is covered up following complaints. A painting depicting Jesus greeting seamen in a lifeboat that was on display at the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy in New York has been covered up after complaints. The painting, Lieutenant Hunter Wood's Christ on the Water, was on display in a room formerly used as the Academy's Interfaith Chapel. The room is now used for official business. According to CBN News, the Military Religious Freedom Foundation, on behalf of a group of USMMA alumni, that's the Merchant Marines, midshipmen, faculty, and staff, complained about the painting, saying its place in the Elliott C room in the main administration building sent an improper message of preferred faith, violating the First Amendment. That's like that's just ridiculous. I was going to say stupid, but I won't say stupid, even though it's stupid. It's not violating the First Amendment. The First Amendment protects it. And what a messed up world we have. U.S. MMA Superintendent Vice Admiral Joanna Noonan requested that the painting be covered with a white curtain until the plans could be made to move it. The Academy plans to move the art piece to the current chapel. 4 House Republicans who attended the U.S. military academies, U.S. Representative Mike Garcia, Mark Green, August Pfluger, and Warren Davidson wrote a letter to Noonan saying the display is constitutional. Well, thank you for that, because it is. And they referred to a 2005 court decision that allowed the display of 10 commandments on government property. U.S. Senator Ted Cruz also wrote a letter in support of displaying the painting. You know, and again, I think I mentioned this a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, about Jordan Peterson was being interviewed by, and it's a pretty well-known and well-traveled YouTube clip that where he was asked by the interviewer, what makes you think that your right to free speech trumps the right of a transgender person not to be offended? You see, this is where the whole problem is. Where did we ever get the idea that anybody has the right not to be offended? And, you know, the Bible says the cross is an offense to those who are perishing. And what just a ridiculous, weak-minded world we live in. And, you know, that's, I talked a little bit about this on Sunday. And, you know, I'd encourage you, I've done this, I think, once before. I don't usually do this, but I would encourage you to go listen to last Sunday's message at church. It was out of Habakkuk. And the prophet was saying in chapter 1, and I'm just going to very loosely paraphrase what he said to the Lord. He said, you know, aren't you going to do something about all this that's going on? You know, he said, I'm seeing things I wouldn't believe that I would ever see. And, you know, we talked about some of the specifics in there. But the interesting thing, and the title of the message is Gloom or Glory. And the message, the Habakkuk started with gloom, but he ended with glory. In the Habakkuk chapter 3 ends with a very beautiful hymn where the prophet says, you know what, even if there's no fruit on the vine, no cattle in the stall, we're going to praise the Lord and give glory to him. So we saw him transition. But the interesting thing that we have to keep in mind in the midst of all that's going on today is what the Lord said to Habakkuk. Habakkuk at the beginning of chapter 2 said, you know, I will take my place on the wall. Prophets are referred to as watchmen. He's speaking obviously figuratively. And see how I will answer when the Lord corrects me. And the correction was to his thinking, because he realized I'm obviously not seeing this right. And the Lord told him, you're not going to believe what I'm going to do. If I told you, you wouldn't believe it. And then he told them about raising up the Babylonians to carry away captive the southern kingdom. But we have to remember that as well. And it needs to create a burden for the lost and perishing around us. Because, you know, we've got a lot more information than Habakkuk got about what God is going to do in this time of wrath on this Christ-rejecting world. And that we need to be telling people about Jesus. Get on that 316 action on 316 and post and share or make a video about your testimony. But make sure you include and hashtag everything John 3:16. Now, the Gateway Pundit says, and again, this is beyond belief in our world today and in our country, but a biological male receives award during the International Women of Courage ceremony at the White House with Dr. Jill Biden. And I did say Jill. A biological male received an award during the International Women Day of Courage ceremony at the White House on Wednesday. Joe Biden and Secretary of State Anthony Blinken proudly stood next to the transgender, a biological male, award recipient. Joe Biden was nowhere to be seen. The International Woman of Courage Award ceremony recognizes those who have demonstrated exceptional courage, strength, and leadership in advocating for peace, justice, human rights, gender equity, and equality, and the empowerment of women and girls in all their diversity, often at great personal risk and sacrifice, according to the State Department. In Argentina, Alba Rueda is a transgender woman who was kicked out of classrooms, barred from sitting for exams, refused job opportunities, subjected to violence, and rejected by her family. But in the face of these challenges, she worked to end violence and discrimination against the LGBTQI plus community in Argentina. the presenter said. So now we're going to other countries to find people to give awards to for these types of things. And just the world has lost its mind. And one last story, and sadly, this comes about the great state of California and how far the mindset of our leaders have fallen. Politico reports that California is going to halt its $54 million Walgreens contract over the company's policy on abortion drug sales. Governor Gavin Newsom is blocking the funding after the drugstore chain said it would no longer dispense abortion drugs in some states. California will not renew a $54 million contract with Walgreens in response to the company's decision not to dispense an abortion drug in states where Republican officials have threatened legal action against them, Governor Gavin Newsom said on Wednesday. The decision, which Newsom previewed in a tweet Monday, comes as the governor and lawmakers have taken broad measures in recent months to ensure abortion is available in California and to make the state a place where people from elsewhere can get the procedure following the June ruling by the Supreme Court to overturn Roe v. Wade. This is an attempt to call the question, which side are you on? Whose side are you on? Newsom said in an interview with Politico ahead of the announcement. Are you going to just cower in the face of bullies? Are you going to just roll over? Well, Newsom, I got news for you. If you don't repent, you are going to cower because you're going to stand at the great white throne judgment for financing and protecting the wholesale slaughter of children in the womb, and even bringing women from other states to do that. These are babies. And, one of the things I always think that's just so ridiculous about this whole movement and the lunacy that's involved in it. It's a fetus. Well, fetus is a Latin word for baby. You're right. It's a fetus. It's a baby. It's a human baby inside of a mother's womb. And so, this is really against the law, what Newsom is doing, because companies have every right to operate. And, you used to see signs, all over, no matter what the establishment was, we reserve the right to refuse service to anybody. Stores can operate on their own and do whatever it is they want. And now, here Newsom is abusing his position of power to hold back $54 million worth of business from Walgreens because they don't want to enter lawsuits in states where they have stores and it's against the law to provide abortion materials. So again, just the world has just gone mad and everything is just unbelievably strange. I don't know how else to put it. Oh, I forgot. I added one more story. And let me just throw this out there. And this comes from Fox News, where California County, the headline says, claps back following report of spy operation on a church that resisted the COVID mandates. Wanted to throw this out there because this is in a church in the Calvary Chapel family, Calvary Chapel San Jose, which is pastored by Michael McClure, who, stood his ground during this whole COVID lockdown process. And, now he has had a countersuit to the county, Santa Clara, County of Santa Clara. Sorry, I lost my place here for a minute. Where he's saying that they were monitoring church members for compliance with health mandates. And, they had limited 100 people or 25% of facilities capacity, whatever was fewer. They required face covering, social distancing, and singing was banned. And, now there's stories of them peeking through the neighbor's fence to watch the church members and tracking them on the COVID tracking system through your phone and violating the rights of these citizens. And the county has said, we haven't tracked churchgoers' movements. Well, they know better. But anyway, this again is just another, I'm sorry, but I haven't heard about any lawsuits against anybody else for staying open during the pandemic and standing up for their constitutional rights. But here there's a church, and I believe the penalties had reached like the $2.5 million figure. And then finally, the court struck it down in February of 2021. And just really strange. A study from Johns Hopkins University last year stated that lockdowns imposed enormous economic and social costs where they had been adopted before, concluding lockdown policies are ill-founded and should be rejected as a pandemic policy instrument. And again, just any effort the enemy can make to shut the church down and to silence the voice, the only voice, which is the church's voice of truth that can make men free, just continues. So again, that's it for today. We had a little bit of shortened time because I really, really want to encourage you to get involved in 316 mission. And again, make sure you look for this logo and for anything out there. And there's, again, a lot of churches that are getting involved in this and creating their own logos and things of that nature, which is great. Because again, this isn't about, promoting our church or any other. It's about Jesus. It's about getting the word out, the message of the gospel in a single verse. We were perishing, but God sent his son so we can have everlasting life. So again, go to that. Let me throw that out there one more time. You can go to 316mission.info on the internet, and you can find downloads there if you just want to post a graphic. And there's some that are a little more feminine, and that's for the ladies on their Instagram page or Facebook pages. And then there's others there that are just kind of in the color theme of the whole effort. Or you can make your own. It doesn't really matter. And we have had the little logo put on the bottom. Again, it's just a 316 logo. It says nothing about our church or any other. And just so you know, something that came from us that is kind of in line with what we're trying to do. So anyway, jump on board. Let's take over the internet for one day at least and let the whole world know about God's love for this world, that he gave his only begotten son, and whoever believes in him would not perish, but have everlasting life. Well, hope you enjoyed the Louie update. And Big Tank, he's just, he sleeps with us. And, we've had little dogs for quite a few years. Up until 3 years ago, we had two little dogs. The bigger one was 18 pounds. The little one was 9. And he's not like them. He sleeps with us, and he's a bed hog, and moving a 65-pound dog is not like moving a 9 or 18-pounder. But he just breath of fresh air for us, and we love having him. Hope you enjoyed seeing him, and I look forward to all the Louie comments this week. So that's it for me, and we'll see you hopefully next week. But what we know for sure is I will see you here, there, or in the air. God bless you.